What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and welcome back to yet another episode of Why Nobody Plays. In this series, I take a look at fan favorite Yu-Gi-Oh cards and talk about why they have not seen that much success at Yu-Gi-Oh TCG tournaments. And I do want to stress in this video specifically that this series really is all about the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG, not Duel Links. And why that matters in this video is that I am well aware that Yubel was a pretty decent card in Duel Links for quite a while in different formats. And at the end of today's video, I'm going to talk about why that was, but the primary focus of today's discussion is Yubel in the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG. Just wanted to say that at the beginning, just in case I had any Duel Links players that clicked this video and were very confused. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe for more episodes, and I have a playlist on the channel of all of the previous entries in the Why Nobody Plays series that I'll link at the end of today's discussion. Yubel was released in 2008 in the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG in the Phantom Darkness Core Booster set. Now that was one of the best sets of all time. You had crazy powerful cards like Dark Armed Dragon and Allure of Darkness that instantly reshaped the entire metagame. Yubel, the Ultimate Nightmare, was actually the cover card of Phantom Darkness, so even if you don't know a ton about the Yubel monsters, you probably recognize that card's artwork. Yubel has 3 different forms. We're going to cover all of them in today's video, and the idea is that each one that you summon is a little bit better than the last. So first, we have the original Yubel, which is a level 10 monster, Dark Fiend, 0 attack, 0 defense, and it says this card cannot be destroyed by battle. You take no battle damage from battles involving this card. Before damage calculation, when this face-up attack position card is attacked by an opponent's monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack. During your end phase, tribute one other monster or destroy this card. When this card is destroyed, except by its own effect, its owner can special summon one Yubel Terror Incarnate from their hand, deck, or graveyard. Now, one thing I want to mention here, which I feel is necessary because the card is over 10 years old, is that even by 2008 standards, this on-field effect was not very impressive. All your opponent had to do to play around it was simply not attack your Yubel, and while there are cards in Yu-Gi-Oh that can force your opponent's monsters to attack your monsters, that really wasn't a viable combo, especially in 2008. The real threat of a card like Yubel is not its on-field effect, but rather it's the effect that allows it to float into better versions of Yubel. I do want to mention here that the biggest downside of the first form of Yubel is that the end phase effect does not trigger the floating ability into Terror Incarnate. Now that might be because they were afraid of the card being too strong, but I think that would have made the card a lot better. Not overpowered, but at least it would have been a little bit more playable. Now, one thing that I find pretty interesting about the history of Yubel is that when this card was first released, I would say that the impact of the bigger forms of Yubel were probably at their peak, but the card itself was the least consistent that it ever had been. There were not a lot of great ways to get a Yubel on the board and destroy it, but as time went on and we got more and more ways to do that, the impact of the bigger forms of Yubel got a lot worse compared to other modern cards. So depending on where you played a Yubel deck in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, you would find one of two situations. Either Yubel would be very inconsistent, but pretty good if you managed to get it to work, or Yubel was fairly consistent, but the payoff was not very good compared to the other releases of that time period. The next form of Yubel is Yubel Terror Incarnate. This is a level 11 Dark Fiend effect monster with 0 attack and 0 defense. You'll notice here that none of the Yubel monsters have any attack and defense, by the way. This card says cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by Yubel, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. This card cannot be destroyed by battle. You take no battle damage from battles involving this card. Before damage calculation, when this face-up attack position card is attacked by an opponent's monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack. During your end phase, destroy all other monsters on the field. When this face-up card leaves the field, you can special summon one Yubel, the Ultimate Nightmare, from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Already, you can probably tell that this card is a lot more useful than the original Yubel. During the end phase, instead of having to tribute another monster or destroy the Yubel, you have this great effect where you get to Dark Hole all other monsters on the field. And that is a very relevant addition to this card because it puts your opponent in a weird spot. They don't want to attack it and they don't really want to destroy it because you'll summon Yubel, the Ultimate Nightmare, but if they leave it around, you get that Dark Hole during your end phase. So by far, Yubel Terror Incarnate is the most annoying Yubel monster to play against. I want to make sure that before we talk about the major issues with these Yubel cards that we've looked at all three of the forms. So Yubel, the Ultimate Nightmare, is a level 12 Dark Fiend effect monster with 0 attack and 0 defense. This is the final form of Yubel. This is the big payoff. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned by Yubel Terror Incarnate, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. This card cannot be destroyed by battle. You take no battle damage from battles involving this card. At the end of the damage step, if this face-up attack position card battles with an opponent's monster, inflict damage equal to that monster's attack to your opponent, also destroy that monster. So in some ways, this card is a lot better. It still can't be destroyed by battle. You still take no battle damage from battles involving it, but now you don't have to wait for your opponent to attack this monster. You can simply attack with this and destroy their monsters while inflicting a lot of damage to your opponent. And that all seems pretty cool, right? But these cards have some issues that I want to address. These are the primary reasons that no one played Yubel at competitive TCG events. There were three basic issues with the Yubel cards even back in 2008. I've already mentioned the consistency issues, but those definitely were very important. But besides that, one of the other big issues is that other than not being able to be destroyed by battle, these cards had no protection effects. Now in theory, they don't need protection effects. The protection is that your opponent might not want to destroy them because you'll summon a bigger form. However, if your opponent has more removal options than you have Yubel monsters, that means your opponent can simply go through all of them in one turn. And in 2008, there were plenty of removal cards. One of the better ones was released in the same set as these ones, Dark Armed Dragon, which could pop 3 cards in one turn, sometimes even more if you were able to put more dark monsters in your graveyard after you summoned it. So getting over all 3 of the Yubel cards was not very difficult for one of the most popular cards in the format. It's also worth noting that the Yubel floating effects are when you can effects, which means they can miss timing. This never really mattered in the TCG because these cards were so bad compared to other cards, but in Duel Links that mattered a lot more, and it was one of the more consistent ways to play around these cards. By forcing these cards to miss timing, you basically invalidate the entire deck, and it's not too difficult for many decks to do. The third biggest issue is that these cards didn't really have that good of on-field effects. The Ultimate Nightmare probably has the best on-field effect because you can use it aggressively, but the problem with this card is that it has no other forms to go into, which means your opponent will have no problem just using a destruction card to get rid of it. What ends up happening because of this is that Yubel Terror Incarnate ends up being one of the better forms to have on the board. The effect is not as aggressively good as Ultimate Nightmare, but it does float into a bigger monster, and the Dark Hole effect is pretty annoying in certain situations. Still, you have to go through a lot of hoops to use these cards. You basically have to design your entire deck around them, and the payoff is simply not there. There was not a huge reason to play them in 2008, and especially nowadays, these effects look pretty bad compared to most modern cards, even at a casual level. So to summarize, the 3 big problems with the Yubel cards in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG is that they were not consistent, they had no protection, and their on-field effects are not very threatening compared to other cards released in that era. So why was Yubel so much better in Duel Links? Well, in terms of consistency, you only have 20 card decks in Duel Links, which obviously increases your odds of opening with a Yubel and a way to destroy it, but also they have the My Name is Yubel skill, which allows you to once per turn shuffle back a Terror Incarnate or Ultimate Nightmare from your hand into your deck to add one Yubel from your deck to your hand. The Yubel monsters lacking protection effects didn't matter as much in Duel Links either, because Duel Links, especially a few years ago, had way less removal options than the TCG did back in 2008. Finally, and this is probably the biggest difference between Duel Links and the TCG in regards to Yubel, in Duel Links when Yubel was added, they already had Fire King Avatar Yaksha in the game. And this card is a great way to trigger Yubel, because when it is destroyed, you can simply pop a Yubel in your hand to summon a Terror Incarnate. In the TCG back when Yubel was added, the best ways to get rid of it were to actually special summon it somehow and then use another card to destroy it. So having one card, Fire King Avatar Yaksha, that could destroy the Yubel in your hand was a really great way to make Yubel a lot more playable. In the TCG, Fire King Avatar Yaksha was not added into the game until 2013. 5 years after Yubel was introduced, which meant by that time, when we finally got a great way to trigger Yubel pretty consistently, Yubel as a card was not very impressive by those standards of that time period. Yes, the deck was a lot more consistent, but the cards were a lot less impactful. Unless Konami gives us a bunch of Yubel legacy support in the future, I don't really see any of these Yubel cards actually being competitively viable. Maybe I'm wrong, but as far as I see it, they would need a lot of legacy support to be even halfway decent. Anyway, that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.